Hey folks, I want to talk today about a weird old idea, and it's called the communion of saints. And I want to tie that idea of the communion of saints with the other idea of community and see how we do. Community, commitment, communion of saints. They all start with the same common root. That's right. That's the root of all those words, common. And you're at the takeout, which is not common. And this is a ministry of Community United Methodist Church in North Muskegon, Michigan. CommunityChurchUMC.org. Check us out. Check in, say hello, be in touch, all of that. So, communion of saints, commitment, community, yeah. The idea of communion of saints is simple. The idea is that Jesus is alive and Jesus is connected to all Christians. And Jesus gives us all sort of a sense of belonging and connection and makes us all one. And so we are communing with Christ. And when we're communing with Christ, we're really communing with one another. All of us who think maybe I'm a part of Christ, I'm connected to, I'm a hand, I'm an eye, I'm a mouth, I'm a whatever I am of Jesus. I'm part of what Jesus is up to in the world. And that's an idea that comes to us from the Bible, from Romans chapter 12. And there, Paul talks about how everyone's a part of the body. Everyone's, important. Nothing is dispensable. We are all necessary, which is great. And that's a good message. And that's not the passage I'm talking about today. But the communion of saints is an idea that goes back a very long way and says, not only am I connected to all of you and to Christians in all parts of the world, in Haiti and Honduras, in Lithuania and Latvia, in Italy, and, in Wisconsin, and not only in Catholic churches and Orthodox churches, but also Ethiopian Orthodox churches and Pentecostal and Baptist and even United Methodist churches. So, as I'm connected to all these people, that's one thing. But then, I'm connected to all the Christians who have gone before, and in time I'll be connected with all those who come after me. That's cool. And it's all growing out of this idea of being part of the body of Christ. But there's a really practical side to this crazy idea. This crazy idea that somehow I'm connected to all of these people who've gone before. I use this phrase, communion of saints, and I want to remind you that saints does not usually, unless you're Catholic, does not usually mean just a certain list of extra special people whom the church has decided are extra special, and so we remember their names and commemorate them one day a year. No. The word saints means set apart by God. And Paul all the time is talking to the saints, to all the saints. And that's all of us. Oh, when the saints go marching in, oh, I want to be in that number. When the saints go marching in, because I want to be a saint. I want to be chosen. I want to be set apart. I want to be holy. Saint means holy, and holy means set apart, and it means claimed, set apart by God. And if that's what it takes for me to be part of the body of Christ, then I am connected to all the parts of the body of Christ that went before. I mean, think of me. I'm 58, and I don't know, maybe I have some of the same nerve cells I had when I was small. Maybe they haven't all died yet. All the others have been replaced. Pretty much all my bones, all my skin, all my everything, they've all been replaced. I'm on my second set of teeth, and you probably are too, unless you're under 6 or whatever it is. We replace our parts, and yet we remain a body, and yet the body has a continuity. I remember the feeling of losing that tooth way back when. I remember that cut. I remember that sunburn and all that skin peeling off me, and yet there's a spirit in me that connects to all those memories, and the thing is gone, and yet I have a memory that connects me to it. There's a oneness. And now if it wasn't just me I was talking about, but it was Jesus and it was God living among us, then that connectedness would be that much more profound and would connect to many people. So we're changing scale from my skin and my eyes and my tongue and whatever. I'm changing scale from that to a worldwide spirit, not a collective consciousness of young, but a shared identity and being that brings us together. So I feel a strange, not necessarily explicable connection with saints who have gone before, whose writings I can read, but also saints I've known who are gone on, as we say, to glory. And yet we remember them. I remember that seat in church, and a guy named Tom who used to sit there until he died. Not in that seat, and for the longest time the congregation left that seat for him until someone new came along and sat in it, and it had been, maybe a year, and that was good, and then 6 months, I don't know how long it had been, but there was that sense of, yeah, we have a wholeness, and he's with us still, connecting with us. We remember him, we own him. He can't leave us because he's part of us. And that's really cool, this communion of saints idea. But it also is, in a practical sense, that memory of all of these amazing people, the stories of the saints, the stories and the memories of those who've gone before us, the people we remember. Those stories inspire us. They shape us, and they encourage us. A long time ago, there was a run on martyrdoms. And it was, at that time, Catholics killing off Protestants in England. And it happened in other places. In the 14th century, it was the Beguines, and not too far from there, it was Joan of Arc. And going back further, we have people who have been models of saints. They didn't have to be martyrs. They had to be simply people claimed by God who lived out that claim, who lived like it made a difference, like it changed their lives and made them into people who were bold and amazing. And we remember some of their stories. have a particular liking in this history of the church for people who died in horrific ways. And so you can read the martyrdom of Pionius or Perpetua and Felicity or of Ignatius of Antioch. You can read stories, and they are all imitating the first Jesus. So they're letting his life shape their lives, and we, if we live up to their crazy example sometimes, we let their lives shape our lives as Jesus shaped them. And there's this constant imprinting. And so, they were imprinted by Jesus, and in turn, we are imprinted by them. And we keep passing on and being shaped and molded, stamped by these people before us. Who has stamped their mark on you? I think I have, for good or ill, stamped my mark on a lot of people. And I hope that usually the mark is good, that usually the imprint is to their benefit, that it makes them closer to God, that it makes them a little wiser, a little more kind, a little something, a little less angry. But I'm not sure that's always the case. I'm just going to try. So the thing I'm telling you has already been said by somebody else. And that is the author, unknown, of the book of Hebrews. Hebrews is sometimes attributed to Paul, but it doesn't say it's by Paul, so why should we? He never shied away from claiming authorship of anything. It doesn't seem to sound very much like him. And in fact, it's one of the best written books in the whole New Testament. It's in really good language, really well put together. And yet it does go on a little bit on this very subject of the communion of saints, or the example of the community that has led up to now, taking the example of the people who've been before us. And so in chapter 11 of Hebrews, and I'm not going to read you the whole thing because it goes on forever. In chapter 11, he or she, this is the only book that could be written by a woman in the New Testament, because it's, so might as well claim it. So the author has this idea to tell us about the great examples of faith throughout history. And for history, this writer goes to the Bible, goes to what was the Bible for her or him. And that means all of the old stories. And so it goes back to Cain and Abel as the first example. Why Cain and Abel? And who's the example for us? I think in our modern world, there are a lot of people who think that the right thing to do when we are offended, when we are insulted, when we're put down, when we're shown up as not good enough, what we should do is be angry. What we should do is lash out at the person who did better than we did on the test. And so we tend to side with Cain, who killed his brother Abel. And this is all in Genesis, in the first few chapters. And instead, the one we're supposed to take as our example in this, according to the author of Hebrews, is, you got it, Abel. Because he gave the better offering to God, period. And then he suffered for it. Then he was killed for it. We don't like to take that person's example because we don't want to end up dead. And the fact is, in America today, ending up dead because of our faith is not a frequent thing. You're much more likely in our country to end up dead because someone hates Muslims, or because someone hates Hindus or Buddhists or whatever, or Democrats or Republicans, than because you're Christian. And the fact is, it's as likely as not that someone claiming to be a Christian will be the one doing the Cain side of the story, which is awkward. So anyway, He goes on from Abel and Cain, goes through a long list, goes through a guy named Enoch, who you may not know anything about, but that's all right, and Noah and Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Sarah, Abraham again, Isaac, Jacob again, Moses again, and then keeps going. Then he's got a list. He says, what shall I say? There's all these other ones I don't have time to talk about. Well, you spent a whole chapter talking about, never mind. Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah, David, Samuel, the prophets. Samuel was a prophet, by the way. This is verse 33 of chapter 11. These were men who through faith conquered kingdoms, did what was upright, and earned the promises. They could, and he lists amazing things they could do. And it says this, they were weak people who were given strength to be brave. And amazing things happened, and they suffered, They were killed off in terrible ways. They were wandering around poor and starving and homeless. And then he says this, and this is the very beginning of chapter 12, and it's one of the great verses. And I should read it to you out of one of the old translations because it's got such a ring in there. With so great a cloud of witnesses. I'm reading it to you instead from the New Jerusalem Bible, which is a great translation. With so many witnesses, and a great cloud all around us, we too then should throw off everything that weighs us down and the sin that clings so closely. And with perseverance, keep running the race which lies ahead of us. Let us keep our eyes fixed on Jesus, who leads us in our faith and brings it to perfection. For the sake of the joy which lay ahead of him, he endured the cross, disregarding the shame of it, and has taken his seat at the right hand of God's throne. Think of the way he persevered against such opposition from sinners, and then you won't lose heart and come to grief. In the fight against sin, you have not yet had to keep fighting to the point of bloodshed. Did you catch that last line? In the last line, he says, you haven't suffered all that bad yet. No one's killed you yet. What do you got to complain about? Which is awesome. To say, you should really be thinking of your spiritual life in terms of creating a living example for the next generation. You should really be thinking about, how am I going to be spiritually ready when it goes terrible? I have to practice now. I have to toughen up now. If I'm going to run that marathon, I better start running today and practice and work my way up to it. But in our country, we are not real familiar with suffering for our faith, and we back away from it. We run away from it. We're not fond of it at all. So the communion of saints I talked about, but what he's asking for, when he shows us the example of all of these people of faith, the patriarchs, the prophets, when he shows us those examples, and many more I didn't read to you, he's calling for our commitment. He's saying, look at the people who've had the highest commitment and imitate them. Imitate them. Let them be an example for you. And finally, imitate Jesus. You know, if I have to sum up in just a few words, what is the Christian message? It is imitate Jesus. Follow Jesus' teachings. Be like him. I said it 3 times. Be like Jesus as much as you can. and keep working on it. And that's pretty much what he just said. Get your commitment up to the highest level. What would it look like if you had the highest level of commitment? And if you're wondering what it would look like, think of the holiest person you know. Think of someone who has stepped up and been relentlessly faithful in the hardest times. Think of someone you know who has been willing to share their faith when nothing has made sense. In times of grief and suffering and hurt and loneliness and brokenness, when everything has gone wrong, someone has held on to faith, and that person is an example to you. It might be, someone famous and dead. It could be St. Augustine. It could be St. Francis. It could be St. Joan of Arc. It could be any number of people. It could be your grandma. It could be my great-grandfather, Thomas Longden Griffiths, who took his comfortable lifestyle and went out nightly and helped people in the very poorest part of Cardiff at the time, down by the docks, where the destitute were, and gave them what blessing he could. That would be awesome, to imitate that. Imitate that. Imitate Christ. Imitate those people who have imitated Christ. Go thou and do likewise. Bless you.